Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Just popping by with another project. So I've got a piece of Pink Frog smooth card, as I always have, 300 GSM, 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches. And I'm going to use my concentric petal 1010. Now, this is just designed as either a background stamp and a focal image. And I thought, could we not create a Christmas card from this? So I've got this old gin glass, and you can see I've done this technique. Oh, I did this technique about 3 years ago, I think. But this, it's not a gin glass, it's a brandy glass, Tracy, and it's crystal. So my husband is really pleased. Because I've taken his brandy glass. He came upstairs the other day and he said, "Why's my brandy glass on your desk?" I said, "Oh, I've been using it for a technique." He said, "A crystal glass?" Yes. I needed something with a bit of weight, to it. So I know that isn't a very good picture for you, but I'm just, like, you can see where I pressed it down because the ink is even coming off on my project. So it's even coming off on the project. So let's just give that a little wipe so that it doesn't react with the colours that I've already. You can see I did it with a brown. So my husband's really pleased. I don't think he'll be drinking out of it again, do you? Oh well. Right, shall we try again? Right, so I'm going to place that down. Let's place it down there. And what I'm going to do is I've got a little jar of water. It's just got a little bit of water in. I'm going to take my paintbrush. So I've got just a nice soft paintbrush, and I'm just going to add water around the glass, the crystal glass. I'm just going to add water just around there so that whatever I add flows a little bit. We'll get the spritzer bottle because we want it to move a little bit. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my Distress Oxide speckled egg, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of a shake. Just give my colours a shake side to side. I tend to shake them side to side so they don't come out at the top of the bottle. So just give them a mix because they're a Distress Oxide, so they're a dye pigment fusion, and you can hear a little ball bearing in there. So just give them a little shake. And what I'm going to do is just add a little dollop of the speckled egg. It is speckled egg. So this is speckled egg. And I've just added a dollop. Now, you saw me add water. It's not moving very much. So if I just spritz the ink with water, just so that that starts moving a little bit more. So then I'm going to take peacock feathers re-inker. So we had speckled egg, and now I'm going to use peacock feathers. I'm going to add a little dollop of peacock feathers. Well, that's more than a little dollop, but just one. There you go. So just one. And then I'm going to take cracked pistachio. I love that colour. I love cracked pistachio. So I'm going to take a little bit of cracked pistachio. Sort of nice, lovely, uplifting colour. I'm going to add a little bit of that. Now, there's no point doing this technique if you haven't got card that can move the colour. So I'm just using my brush now just to blend that round. So I'm using a wet brush just to blend the colour, just to blend that around my project. And what you can do is you can add a little bit more water if you want, so that it flows out. Bring it into the camera, Tracy, so that it blends out to this edge of the card if you want. Now, what I do like is when you're doing this, you'll see the colours, and some's going to seep under the glass. That's the whole point of the technique. But if I dab some into there, it will move, but I can just take my brush and I can just move that. It's a nice, easy way of getting a nice flowing background without sort of being too technical about it. So you can then look at your colours and you can quite easily just dab another blob of colour in. You can just add a little dollop of colour. And what happens is, because I've got all that water on there, it starts to move. But can you see it's not sort of moving too much? It just it's moving and it starts to marble a little bit. But you just touch it with your wet brush just to blend the colour a little bit, or it'll just sit there. Now, that's fine if you want it to just sit there. So if you just wanted to just leave this here and just add blobs of the green, you can just add blobs of the green and let it do what its own thing. You can let it just sort of move out into the wet areas, and it sort of looks like a marbled effect. And you can leave that doing its own thing for quite a while. And what you can do is, let's just clean up, and then we'll just grab our heat tool. Let's grab our heat tool. What I like about this is, it's not, if you try to lay the colour down yourself, it's very regimented. So what I like about this is, because you add the water, it moves freely in its own direction. And that's what I like. I like the fact that it moves nice and freely. Now, I can dry that. Now, with it being fluid, you can move it with your heat tool. So you can move the colour because it's very fluid. So you can move that colour with your heat tool because that is very fluid. Now, if I lifted the glass up, well, it'd just all flood into the centre, and you don't want to do that. But I want to have, what I'm doing is, I'm moving the colour around the circle because that'll be darker. So it'll be darker at the edge of the circle. And it's lovely because it just gives a nice random background. And it's lovely if you do this in your journal. Works really well in your journal. Just give that a nice dry. Now, you could also do it a different way. You could add a ring of colour to the glass, press that down onto the card, and then just add the colour on the outside. But you get a nice deep colour around where the glass area is. Obviously, your card has got to be able to take this colour. Not this colour, this water. If your card doesn't take the water and won't take the moisture, then it won't work. But what I love about this is it just gives a totally random feel. So I'm just turning this around, just turning the glass around. Now, there are certain things that you need to be aware of. When you're adding little blobs of colour, it sits there on your card and it's a concentration of colour. So what you want to do, where you've added these concentrations of colour, spritz it with water, because you don't want that colour just sitting on the surface doing nothing. Especially because I'm using the re-inkers. You don't have to use re-inkers, you can use watercolour. You can also use sprays and just dab a few sprays, but I love the random feel to this, because if you try to create it randomly yourself, you just don't do it as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just drying now and pushing that colour around the edge of that glass. So I'm just pushing the colour around the edge of that glass, just so that it's really dark around the circular area of the glass. And you need to make sure that that's all dry. There is no point me lifting the glass until that's all dry. And you can tell whether it's dry or not, because I can still see the liquid flowing around the glass. So I'm just giving that time to dry. I added a lot of moisture, and that's why I used a glass with some weight in it. If I used a glass that's got no weight, it would seep under more. And again, because it is wet around that glass, if I lifted it, it would just seep and bleed. So I'm just making sure that's dry. Yes, you can go in and you could blot that. You could blot that with kitchen roll and blot up the excess ink, but that defeats the whole object of having the dark area around the glass. And that's why it's good when I can demo at my own pace, because then I don't feel rushed. I don't feel like I have to rush the technique at all. Now just remember, I'm heating this for a long time, so your card is really hot. So don't then go and put your hands on this area here or the bottom of the glass, because it will be very hot. And I can still see that that's fluid. So I'm just going to keep drying a little bit more. I don't want to lift the glass until I'm sure that it's mainly dry. I don't mind a little bit seeping underneath, because that just, you know, sort of adds to the effect. Now, if you don't want to dry with a heat tool, I mean, you should dry some of it really, because you've got that pure distress re-inker. It's good to give us some of it a dry. But say you got to this stage and you don't want to dry it any longer, then go away, have a cup of tea, go and do some chores around the house and let it dry naturally. That's absolutely fine. But remember, I'm heating the non-stick craft sheet here, so it will be hot. I'm just drying now. But I would say naturally, if you were drying it naturally, with the amount of moisture I used, it would take quite a while. I can still see, as I'm heating it, I can still see this area moving here, and it's going to be quite dark, which is exactly what I want. While that's just resting a bit, I'll go and get another glass, she says. Let me show you. Where's my other glass? By the way, I didn't tell Ian that I'd taken 2 glasses, not 1. I didn't tell him that bit. So this one again has been used with brown. So let's just give that a little bit of a wipe. And I probably did this it was a long time ago now, and you can still wipe that off the glass. Now you saw me do that one that way, so I've got another piece of card here. Now you can do it slightly different, but it'll look different as well. So let's grab which colour shall we grab? Shall we grab the cracked pistachio? So let's grab a little bit of the cracked pistachio, which that isn't a little bit, that's super concentrated. So let's grab a little bit of kitchen roll. You just got a huge, one of those huge kitchen rolls. Right. Let me just take a little bit of moisture off my brush. Let's pick up this colour and let's just add it just around here. Okay, so you can, for instance, press that on there and then you've got your circle. I want to show you the difference because there's reasons why you do things. You know, sometimes you might think, oh, what's the point of doing that? Right, let me show you. So what you can do then is, I've got my brush that's nice and wet, and then I can go around just so. Let's take a little bit more water so that it moves a little bit more. So I'm showing you a different way you can do it, but how different it looks. And the reason why you do things in different ways. It doesn't mean any of them are wrong. It just means it's a different way of doing it. That's all. That's it. So if you prefer this way and it's easier for you, you can do it this way. So then I'll take a little bit of the speckled egg. So take a little bit of the speckled egg. Make sure you've got moisture on your card. Pick up the speckled egg and dab that just on your card. Now, I don't want to spritz, because if I spritz, it'll bleed into this area too much. So what I'm doing is I'm using a nice flat brush just to dab the card. Now I can spritz up here, no problem at all, because that's not going to, and I can spritz down there because it's not going to affect that circle. So let's then take a little bit of the darker colour, which is peacock feathers. And look how little you use of the re-inkers, because they're a concentration of colour. So what I'm trying to point out is you have to purposely try and not be too regimented when you're doing it this way. So just add that water. So you purposely have to not be too regimented with it. So I'm just using the water, and then I can instantly see I need a little bit more of the greeny colour, which is the cracked pistachio. So we'll just rinse my brush, pick up that cracked pistachio. Just move that around my card a little bit. And can you see I'm sort of touching the card? Now I'm going to spritz some of it because you want it to oxidise. Let's pick some of that colour up so it doesn't, because you want that to oxidise. Oops, try not to move your camera, Tracy, which is not a good idea. Let me just pick that up. And then let's give this a dry. So you can give it a little dry, and then you can add more layers of colour. You can also go in and just spritz very lightly so that you get that oxidisation. So I can go back in with a little bit of the speckled egg, and you can keep adding little bits to the project, just to change it up a little bit. So you can keep doing that, and then just spritz a little bit. Can you see it's moving a little bit into here, which is absolutely fine, because what you do to stop that is just start drying. And can you see when you've got puddles of water, this is why sometimes you let things dry naturally, because watch the heat tool, it moves that colour, it moves it. So that's why sometimes you let things dry naturally. I haven't got time to let things dry naturally. I just need to. Now, I don't want to dab things, because if I dab it with the kitchen roll, it'll take some of that concentration of colour out. So let's leave that on one side. Bring the one in from before where we've got the glass, and let's dry a little bit more. And I want to show you the difference. This has still got moisture around the glass, so I'm just drying a little bit more. And that's because I added a lot of concentration of colour just around that glass. So I'm going to now lift that up just so that you can see that. And you won't see the difference until, let's just give that a dry now. I bring the other one in. So I didn't lift the glass until I knew it wouldn't move too much. I like these little bits that come in, that's fine. So I'm just giving that a really good dry. And can you see you've got that real concentration of colour around that circle? It's more natural. The colour is very natural as well. So I'll just give that really good. And then turn it over. Can you see? Because that shows you how much moisture I added to the card. The card is good quality cardstock. There we go. So what I like to do then is I like to just go and get some copier paper. And what you have to remember is that there is a real concentration of colour with this, because you saw me dot down the colours. You saw me place the glass and then take this colour and add it neatly to the card. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting, can you see? So you could create another project from that. So you could grab another 4.5 by 6.5 piece of card, place that onto this, and then you'd get that perfect circle. So there's but can you see there's a pure concentration of colour there? And if I do it again, you can see how much concentration of colour is. So what I'm going to do is hold my water spritzer high up, and I'm going to just spritz that card high up, from high up, with some water. Let me just grab another piece. And the reason I'm spritzing that high up is so that there isn't too much movement in that colour. And then I'm just going to give that another dry with my heat tool. But I can see that this colour is more random. The background is more random. It's not quite as regimented. And also the colour is more concentrated. Obviously, you can go to the other one and add that concentration of colour, keep adding it. But by adding it this way, I sort of don't break down the card too quickly. But if I just, can you see that shining? That's the pigment lying on the top of the card. So if I turn, so this is my paper, and if I turn it over to the clean side, and just, I'll just get it all over my hand, but there you go. Let's just do the other side, just so you can see. Try and use should have used another piece of copier paper. But can you see, it's now less. It's less. So let me get rid of that copier paper. So what you have to be aware of is the properties of what you are using. And I believe that you only sort of develop a knowledge of the properties of a product by using it. Standing on the shelf, you never learn anything. So what I'm going to do is spritz again, high up, very lightly with water, very lightly. And then I'm just going to dry with my heat tool. And it's so that that pigment is not just lying there on the surface doing nothing. Let's give that a really good dry. And I believe good techniques deserve good quality procedures. Quality card is always important, but procedures and following, you know, sort of guidelines when you're using products is a good practice. So I've got a clean piece of copier paper now. So let's use my fist and just go around the whole card, so you know I'm not cheating. And it's a lot paler, but have you noticed it's just where the concentration of colour is? Have you noticed it's not the rest? The rest had that soaking, it was soaked with water, and therefore it's not just lying on the top. So you have to be aware that I'm using a re-inker product that is super concentrated, and what I'm doing is I'm using it for another technique rather than just re-inking my ink pad. So I just have to make sure that I just do certain things, that's all, but it's worth it for a good quality result. And what I love about the oxide re-inkers is that concentration of colour. I love that concentration of colour. And for me, being creative is part of the fun, and it doesn't matter to me taking 20 minutes out of my time to create a background. You see, now it's almost gone. So it's worth those procedures, right? I'll just knock everything over. So this is the other background. Nothing wrong with that background at all. So it's not as concentrated, because what I did was I applied the re-inker here, not here, because I'd need to spritz it and then it'd flood in here. That's why I use the glass. But you can see here it's a less concentration of colour. But that might be what you prefer. And you can still go in and spritz with water and move your colour. And you've still got that beautiful background, but this is just slightly more concentrated. That's it. And the circle is more richer, defined, thicker. So that's fine. And you can have this bleed into your circle just to add to the effect. This won't get wasted, that will get used. But it's just showing you why you do certain things in different ways. So you have to be aware that you don't want this pigment just lying on the surface. You want to make sure you have spritzed that with water and reacted. Now, when I stamp on this, if I have a look, you can see that that is very concentrated in that colour, but I like it so much that I'm prepared to just work a little bit more. So I've spritzed it with a little bit more water, and I'm just going to dry again. I also like this little bit here that's just coming up there, just lovely. Now if you wanted to, you could just stamp a little scene in there, and that would be your card done. So you could stamp some little tree branches, you could stamp a little bird, and then you'd have like a scene inside your circle. Can you also see when I spritz a little bit more with water, some of that concentration of colour works through into the background, which is what you want it to do. Okay, I just think education and showing you some of my mistakes, and from those mistakes I learn, and then I can pass those details on. Because in a lot of demonstrations, obviously you don't have time to do this. Now I've got no ink coming off. In a lot of demonstrations, can you imagine if you were on TV and you spent 30 minutes doing this? Well, I wouldn't have used a product, and they can't sell product if I just spent time doing this. And that's why on TV it's different than in real life. So I did put the heating on. Big mistake, because now I'm absolutely boiling. But I think that's why long-term education is key, because you will see somebody do fast demos, you will see them do reels. So when you do a reel, you'll see them do a quick demo, which is great for some of you. You just want a quick demo like I do with my snippets. But sometimes if we did this in a quick demo, so if I showed this on a reel, you wouldn't understand when you came to do it at home why when you put your hand on here you were picking up ink, or you wouldn't understand that, because we'd need to go through a video like this to explain why. Because I'm using a product that is designed to re-ink your ink pads. And when I buy a product, I like to see if I can do something else with it. So if I do something else with it, there are procedures you have to follow to make sure it will work for you, because you're using it for something it wasn't designed for. So here's the other one now, and still looks beautiful, but totally different to this. But I just think it's important to explain that. Right, so what I can do now is, what I was thinking was, if I just take this off the acetate, so let's take this, place this onto my acrylic block, and if you place it straight, it's often a really good thing. So if I take my acetate now, I can see that circle fits rather nicely on there. Anybody would think it was planned, but that circle fits rather nicely on there, which I rather like. Right, so what I'm going to do now, let me grab my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use an ink pad that is designed to work on a porous surface. So in other words, when you stamp it, it sinks into that surface. Well, it's not going to do that here, is it? It's not going to sink into that surface because I've added all that concentration of ink. Not a chance is it going to sink in to that surface. So now if I used archival ink dries quickly, which is great on a surface like this. However, on a detailed stamp like this, archival won't work, because you'll be inking, and if I waffle, it'll dry on this ink pad, and then it won't pick up that beautiful detail because it dries too quickly. That's what it's designed to do, but that's designed for different things. So I've got my VersaFine Clair. Now, if I'd got just a little tiny flower, like just that flower bit, I could use archival because it would stay wet long enough just for that little small detail. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ink this stamp, and I'm going to give a really good inking, preferably of the main circular area. So I'm going to give a really good inking. Can you see? I'm going over and over. Now, you couldn't demo this on something like the TV because you'd be falling asleep. Because on TV it has to be fast and furious and you have to get through so much within an hour. Well, that's why I have a YouTube channel, because some things have to be explained and have to be explained in detail. So what I'm going to do now is I've used that archival ink, and what I'm going to do is take my kitchen roll. I'm not going to scrub, I'm going to dab some of the ink where the text is. So I'm going to dab some of that ink. And what all that will do is diffuse some of that ink. Okay, so you can see if it's wet by just moving your stamp around. And let's just have a look. This is harder than you think with the, is it about there? Now, can you see how much I faffed with that? Now, if I faffed like that with an archival ink, not a chance would that archival ink stay wet enough. No way. Whereas the VersaFine Clair stays wetter, longer. However, what I'm doing now is using that VersaFine Clair on a surface that it's just going to sit on. So let's just... Now, you saw that concentration of ink. You saw how much ink I added to that background. So let's just give that time just to... It won't soak into the card because I've added that layer of ink, but we just need it to make contact with the surface of that oxide. So just allow that just to soak in. Not soak in, just to be there on top of the card. And especially where you've got sort of the silhouette edges of the floral. I've got the acrylic block that I can just lever like so. Right, so now what you've got is the background detail. Now, you're not going to get a dark print here, but that doesn't matter because we're going to add that floral over the top. But there are things I need to explain. So, I already knew that it was going to be pale-ish around that edge, and I diffused the ink so that we just got a little bit of detail in the background. But you can see the black in the centre here is nice, it's perfect, it's stamped nicely. So what you have to remember is that's just sitting on that surface. So let's grab a clean piece of paper. So if I rub over this now, you will see this ink, the circle. That's not the ink from the oxide, that's the ink from the circle. Now you can see that the inner bit, it's dry, nothing's come off. The black on here is sitting on that surface of oxide and it's not absorbing in. So you need to blot or dry. So let's just give that a little bit of a dry, just to make sure, one, that we're not going to smudge that ink and that it's definitely permanent. And you need to be aware of that. Thought I'd got a little bit on me. So let's just... Brilliant. So that's the couple of things you need to be aware of. You need to be aware when you're using products that weren't designed for this in mind, but I always like to do different projects. So what I'm going to do then is, if we use our pen, this is like a biro really, that's just, and then we'll make this in to a bauble. Now it's important, it's very important that you make sure your card is dry. Let's grab something that's a little bit blacker. So that was my biro. Just grab my micron pen, just so this little bit is a little bit blacker. Where's my, I can never work out if it's working. Oh, and of course I picked the only pen that I need to get going. There we go. Ah, that's a little bit better. Just so that you're going to make this bauble shape. And what we're going to do then is, let's grab a scrap of card, which is often easier said than done. So now we'll take our floral, and again ink with a good layer of ink. And then we can stamp this onto our card so we can cut the floral out. Now, this stamp isn't designed for a seasonal make. It's just designed as a beautiful stamp for a background stamp and a focal imagery. But there's always ways of adapting your stamps so they can be used for different reasons. Now, look at your stamp now. It stamps beautifully, and it's a lot darker just on that white card because it absorbs into there, and you're not trying to stamp on the oxide. So I'm just going to blot that. Nothing comes off because most of it is absorbing into the card. Now, VersaFine Clair is an ink pad with a good open time, and that means it just means it stays wetter longer. So because it stays wetter longer, it picks up that detail from those stamps beautifully. So I'm now going to cut out this little floral. Now, don't try and draw or do too much on your card too soon. You've seen how much moisture I've added to that card, and all as you will do by drawing on there or using your pens is break down that card. So you do need to be aware that when you add that much moisture, obviously it breaks down the fibres of the card. So just cutting the floral out. There we go. And I'm going to colour this floral in a red colour because I think it will pop quite nicely on there when I've got the red on there. I think that will pop beautifully. It'll work really nicely. So I haven't got, what a surprise, I haven't got the red out. Let's just move my little trolley. Not that I can move the trolley because there's that much stuff. I've got card everywhere. So let's get my Ecolines. Now, it's up to you which colouring medium you want to use. You don't have to use exactly what I'm using. I love the Ecolines because they're so lovely and bright. I think that's the main reason that I use them. She says as she tries to find, and I have to do it every single time. I have to bring the same reds out because I can never remember whether it's scarlet or carmine. So we've got scarlet, carmine, one's more pinky, and then we have the reddish brown. That's it. And you know, I love it when a project works out. It's just wonderful. So it's not until I don't read the labels, but what I do is I put them next to each other. I think I'm going to go for that one, carmine. Oh, I don't want the scarlet. I'm going to go for the carmine. Do you like how I just can't make my mind up. Let's just be honest. I'll go for the carmine. So I've got reddish brown and carmine. So I'm going to add the reddish brown. Now you could add lots of dimension to this if you wish. No problem. You could just cut out the concentric layers and just layer that up. You could also just have this coming down from the page and then have them 3D'd. Let me grab my water brush. Oh, and I've actually got a jar of water so I can make sure. So I'm going to take the carmine and water that down with a little bit of water and then come in and just blend that out and do exactly the same again. And this for me is just, this is, if you like, subtle, and it's just very watered down. Let's add a little bit more water. There we go. But I'm going to go in with another layer of colour and just add another layer of that colour. And what I'm going to do now is take a little bit of moisture from that brush so that I've got less water on there, therefore it's not watered down as much. And I always end up with some on my hand. So not as much watered down. Now this has got moisture on, so I'm going to go back with the reddish brown and I can just add a little bit more depth. Just to... And what I'll do now, it's just got a little bit more depth. I'm just going to let that rest a while. So I'm going to grab my white embossing now. And if you've followed the whole process, even though you saw me dry this lots of times, now even though I've dried this and there's nothing visible here, there is still going to be some moisture throughout that card. So what will happen is if I go and sprinkle embossing powder on here now, and I only want it in certain areas when I've stamped something, it'll just stick everywhere. So what I'm going to do is use my anti-static bag. So let's just wipe over it with my anti-static bag. Just add that to there. And then we'll take my stamp. And obviously we need our sticky ink pad. So we'll take our sticky ink pad. And what I'm going to use is the Meander Through Beauty, or Meander, whichever they've changed it to. And we're going to use this background stamp here. Now, because I've added that anti-static bag, you saw how much moisture was on there. You saw how I handled the card quite a lot. The anti-static bag will prevent me adding embossing powder and it's sticking everywhere. All I want the embossing powder to do is to stick to this text. I don't want it to stick all the way over the card. So I'm going to add a little bit of the stamping here. Now, I do find that when we're doing embossing, sometimes it's so easy to overpress those stamps. So don't press too hard. And you can see that embossing, it's just stuck where I've added the text. So the product, the anti-static bag, is doing exactly what it's designed to do. So we'll take it again. And the reason I'm adding the embossing powder as I go along is because if I don't, I can't see where I'm adding the text. There we go. I can't see a thing there. But the minute I add the embossing powder, that helps me visualise where I'm stamping. And if, let's just flick that a little bit. Now, if you've got any stray embossing powder and you didn't use an anti-static bag, well, you can just use a very, very fine brush. And if you've got anywhere you don't want it, just remove that before you even, so it allows you to make your embossing a little bit more random as well. And it allows you to remove any if you haven't used an anti-static bag. So I'm going to ink that up again. And by doing it this way, I can see exactly where I'm adding that stamping. Yes, it takes a little bit more time, but I don't create because I'm in a rush. I create because I enjoy it. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the final results. Everybody works at a different pace, but I'm a great believer in it's not about rushing. So let's take that again. I do like the Versamark watermark stamp pad. It just adds a good amount of stickiness to make sure that that embossing sticks where you want it to. So let's just, you can see I still give it a little tap just to make sure. And this is a nice fine text, so it works beautifully. Now, who says you have to have Christmas stamps for Christmas? Why can't you use what you've got? There we go. We can adapt things, can't we? Let's add a little bit of, definitely can't see where I've added that. Oh, there we go. Just a perfect little touch there. Right, let's just tip this back into here, which will make my camera go absolutely mad. There we go. So you can see, look at that fine text, just beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is heat my heat tool up. And I'm just giving that heat tool time just to heat up. Just give it time to do its thing. Because I'm not going to go to the card before I need to. I'm just going to make sure the heat tool is quite hot. And I tend to lift the card a little bit, mainly because I can't see turn if I don't lift it as well. But also that means I'm not hitting the non-stick craft sheet as well. Hopefully that will start turning quite quickly, which it does. And what this will do is the white embossing will echo the white that's in that circle on the inside of that circle. It will echo that. Now once you've heated the embossing powder, just make sure you move. But I just love, is that my heat tool? I just love the fact that the white, it's nice and fine text, and it just makes it pop a little bit more. Just love that. So what I'm going to do is make sure my gel pen is working. Just going to add a little bit of gel pen there. You have to remember there's quite a lot of moisture still in there, so I can easily add a little bit more white shortly. So I've now got my red that's going to on here, but it needs another layer. But you can also 3D that as well. So do I want to 3D? If you're not sure whether you want to 3D, which I'm not, let's just take another floral. Let's just stamp that again. There we go. And then scissors. Let's go in a layer, which is this one here. So I'm just going in a little layer. What's hilarious is this has got some embossing, I think, or something on the card, some embossing powder. So, and what I'm doing is, for me, everything has to be visual. I'm not very good with instructions. I have to see things being done. So, and because of that, I like to have the piece in my hand so that I can visualize whether I want another layer. So this would go on here. This is going to be red as well, but do I want the other? Do you know, I think I do. And you can say, well, why have you coloured in there? Well, it doesn't matter. I want to see some colour underneath anyway, but I'm now going to colour this because, and I may even add a smaller one as well, but we'll see. So I'm going to add because it just looks a little bit more professional if it's all coloured. So I'm using the two colours, which I didn't give you the number. So Carmine, which is 318, and Reddish Brown 422. And I'm not rushing that colouring. And this is just your first layer. It's definitely easier when you've got some water handy. So I'll need, hang on a minute, I need watered down. There we go. So when I decide what layers I'm adding, I'll add more colour to the top layer and make it more definition when I've decided what's going on top of what. So this is going to go on top of that, like that. Do I want another? Nothing like being pernickety. Right, let's grab another piece of card. There it is. I can't pick the piece of card up, which is really handy. So I'm then going to just take my stamp again and just grab that little floral. And this is how your ideas develop. So it's just that central floral bit that I want. Oh, hang on a minute. Let's go for that, the number 2. It's going to make my eyes go funny, this is now. Remembering which one I'm cutting out, but hilarious. So I'm just creating that concentric floral, and I think I've gone one too many there. Have I? Hang on a minute. No, that'll be fine. Just leave it like that, Tracy. Stop making it complicated. So just cut out whichever, I'm just going to say whichever concentric part of the floral you want. So we need to cut that out. There we go. So then I'm going to colour again. Now I'm going to make sure that this one has got lots of real dimension of colour, because this will be the top one. So I'm going to make sure that that is all coloured nicely. Now, if you don't want to add dimension, there is also a way around that. If you don't want any dimension on this card at all, go back with your black pen and add the darker lines with your black pen and then colour it direct on the bauble. If you don't want dimension and you want to send it in the post, then you can do it that way. I'm then going to grab my adhesive. I love a bit of dimension if I'm sending a special card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this one down first, and I'm just going to stick that down in the middle. So let's sort of pinch. Now which way? Hardest bit is finding which way it goes. Not that it matters, I suppose. So just, I've adhered in the middle so I can lift these petals up a little bit. Now you can leave it like that if you wish. So then I'm going to add the next layer and just give it a little bit of movement. Let's add the adhesive in the middle, just in the middle there. A good adhesive, and then you really don't know which way it goes. But again, I'm not going to panic about that. Scissors. So what I'm going to do is, if I hold my scissors with it in the centre like this, I can then, she says, lift these florals. You see, and I can hand this to somebody or I can send it in a box. Now, I'm aware that postage costs are very high, so that's why I've said if you didn't want to add the dimension, then you can just colour the actual bauble and not add the dimension. So let's now Now we're going to colour this a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit of that darkness. And then I'm going to go back in with my carmine just to add another layer of colour. Now there's no point me going in with a white pen at the moment because that is not dry. It's just no point. So let's just... Now you can use all your ball tools and everything like that to shape your floral. And then I can drop it on the floor. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the adhesive in the centre, nice good dollop. Get my scissors ready. And then just drop it. Unbelievable. Did not want to just drop it like that. Do I want that there? You do realise I'm going to faff for England. There we go. So I'm just going to hold those up like so. And then I'm just going to remove a little bit of that adhesive because I'm a bit pernickety when it comes to things like that. That's it. That's me all over, just being a bit fussy, but you can see that's now beautifully got some dimension. So what I'm going to do is, now the card's rested a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit more, sort of twiddly bit, just to, there we go. Where's my white gel pen? This is where I lose myself. Oh, I've just chucked it at the other end of the room, that's why. I'm just adding a little bit more. I'm just adding a little bit of white, just sort of to some of the stem. I'm then going to take my white Posca pen and I'm going to splatter. Make sure you grab some of that flour because it'll just lift it. There we go. It just lifts that. Now the other stamp set that I want I've not got because it's I put it away. I'm good like that. So I'm going to use my Seasons stamp set, which is stamp set 455, and I'm going to use December this time. Where's my little A7 acrylic block? I was too organised and I actually put it away. I will just ink the December up with our black, the Nocturne ink. Just allow that to soak into there, nice and easy. Just make sure my hands are clean. And we'll just cut that out. So I'm just checking something, like I always do. Do I want it? No, I want it smaller than that. Do you like how I change my mind? Do it every time. There we go. So then you need to decide where you want to place your December. I quite like it there. Just sort of gives balance to this somehow. Just works for me. And I'm going to leave that in the white card. I like my Christmas cards. I don't want a black mat on this. That's just a personal choice. But you could create a mat in silver if you wished. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to let that just grab hold of there. Did I actually add adhesive? I was going to say, did I add adhesive to that end then? It just wasn't sticking. So I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds just to grab a hold, just so you can see you've got the beautiful dimension on there. And then I'm just going to just curl that card. Now, if you use double-sided tape, it's easy. I don't use double-sided tape, but if you use double-sided tape, it will make sure that it grabs and it sticks on your card nicely. But I don't use double-sided tape, or if I do, it's very rare. I don't know whether I've stuck that, you know. I don't think I have. I think I missed a bit. Let me just add a little bit of adhesive to there instead of trying to fight and stick it down when there's no adhesive on. That's with talking, you see. There was no adhesive on that side of the card. There we go. So I'm then going to grab my little Inktense pencil. Just add a little bit of shading there. Let's make sure that brush is clean. Which I'm telling you now, when you've used red, it's not clean. So you've got that oxide underneath. So don't use too much water. You just want it to be a suggestion of that, just so that it's on there. I'm then going to take that gel pen. And just add a couple of sort of white bits to my lettering, just so that you can see that. Just love it. So I'm going to grab my gold pen, my gel pen, and I'm just going to add a few sort of dots of gold. Not many, just a few here and a few just down here. Let me just lift that up for you. Just a few gold touches, just so you can see that. Just so you can see. Let's just place that back. So I like to add this to my 5.5. This one is 5.5 by 7.5. Is this card? Is it? Do you know when you're not convinced? I'm going to get my tape measure. I've done that many cards now. No, this is 5 by 7. So we can either have 5 by 7. I'm sure we had a 5.5. I did. It's here. That's the one. So I'm going to use a 5.5 by 7.5. So this was 4.5 by 6.5, and I'm adding a bigger card. So I'm now going to need to make sure that I add plenty of adhesive. Now, if you use your double-sided tape, you don't need to worry because it'll grab hold instantly. Now, I like to use a wet glue. Everybody, it's a personal choice, because I know that I won't, you know, I always like to manoeuvre a little bit to get it just in the right place. So when you're using something like a wet glue and you've used, like me, moisture in the card, it's important that you sort of make sure that you press in the middle of the card and around those edges. Just make sure you stamp around those edges. Not stamp, press, Tracy, you're not stamping again. Just make sure that you press around those edges. Let's just put that adhesive. A good adhesive as well. But make sure you press in the middle there so that it just grabs hold of that. And then I just love sort of the white on white, because it just seems more subtle for Christmas rather than have a black border. And I absolutely love that, using a stamp that isn't Christmas, but we have made that Christmas. And I absolutely love that. Just out of interest, do these... Oh, I've put it away again. I don't think these splatter, do they? You see, you ask yourself sometimes a silly question, oh, does it splatter? If you don't know, test it. Right, so that is your card finished. And I'm hoping you enjoyed the process. I know it was a little bit longer, but it's important to go through the whys, what ifs, and why do I do this? But that is the other background, which I will probably create a little scene in and create another bauble. But you've got two backgrounds, the reasoning behind why I did certain things as well. But I hope you enjoy creating this. I love it. But I can use this all year round because it's not a Christmas stamp. It is a stamp that's designed for every day. You could even cut out this. You see, this is why my videos are so long-winded, because I never shut up. Right, let me grab another piece of... Oh, this piece of card in front of you, Tracy, is perfect, dear. So, let me just show you. So, you can take the circles that are on there. You should blot really before you cut out, but you know me. You see, I get all excited and then I'm like, where are my scissors? Try having less on your desk is usually a good thing as well. And don't do as I do and chuck them the other end of the room and then you can't see them. So if I cut around the circle, I'm only just showing you ideas how when you create something, other ideas develop. That's all I'm trying to do. So let's just colour this in red. I just want to show you why stamps are so inspiring and the fact they don't date. So there's the water brush. Let's just give that a clean. Let's just pick up that and blend out so we've got no lines. A little bit more. Just so that fades out a bit. Now, with your card, I think we should make sure we've got a clean surface that we're working on. Let me just grab my kitchen roll, just so we can lean the card on there, especially after you've done all your work. But if you wanted to, you can then take this and draw another bauble coming down. But you know what I mean? I'm trying to show you that the minute you create one card, you can create another, but you could instantly just use these circles within the stamp and have a load of baubles coming down just with the circle. Just works quite nicely. You could also bring in the circle here, just so that you've got that balance as well. But it's entirely up to you how you work with them. But I really enjoyed that session, and I hope you did too. So love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.